back, everyone. This is another episode of Rediscovering God. I'm joined with my friend Dayvaughn Mays tonight in another episode of our Leaving Idolatry series. Dayvaughn, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Shalom, everybody. My name is Dayvaughn Mays. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm 44, and thanks for having me today, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you coming on. But first things first, guys, before we get into this interview, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give us 2 thumbs up if you like what we're doing here. But yeah, man, these Leaving Idolatry interviews, that's exactly what it is. You know, working your way out of it. You know, for some people it happens fast, and for some people it's a long process. So first question, how long ago did you begin to question the claims of Christianity?
About 15, I say maybe about 20 years ago, I started to question, and I left about 15 years ago when I tried to get baptized, and they wouldn't baptize me because I was going to a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, and been going there since I was 6 years old. I was in my 20s, and they said I wasn't doing enough field service. And according to the book of Acts, chapter 8, I believe, the Ethiopian showed up, asked some questions about Isaiah, got baptized on the spot, right? No field service, no nothing. And I was like, well, y'all don't even follow what this book is saying, right? Now, before that, I had a whole bunch of problems with everything was always about Jesus. Mm-hmm. That was my first problem. It wasn't because the Jehovah's Witnesses don't teach that he's God, right?
Right.
They completely make a distinction, but everything was always only about Jesus. Not to say that they didn't have, because the witnesses have a bunch of literature, like a lot of literature, mm-hmm. Books upon books. They got libraries of books, but everything is just always surrounding Jesus. And I thought that was weird that we always talking about Jesus. So in the back of my mind, I knew something wasn't right with that. And then I started noticing stuff that they did. Like, they don't do birthdays, holidays, and all this stuff, but they have their own anniversaries of when they open up their churches. Like, it was a little double standard.
They celebrate what they want to celebrate. Huh?
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? And they would disfellowship people a lot. And not to say that, you know, that was a completely terrible thing, because everybody has a concept of disassociating yourself with bad influences, because I kind of get that. But at the same time, the standards was it was double standards on a lot of stuff.
Right.
But once I tried to get baptized and they wouldn't baptize me, I was like, you know what, that's it. Started asking a lot of questions. Started asking my mom a bunch of questions. She started asking them questions. They didn't want to hear her questions, so we kind of both just kind of started stepping away from it. You know what I mean? And I came across a Messianic congregation, which a lot of people go through that phase before they come out of the New Testament. I found a Messianic congregation called Beth Messiah, and like 2 other ones that were close to my house. Beth Messiah was real far, but I would still drive to go there because I heard their pastor on the radio, and that's when I got introduced to Hebrew. He would say a lot of the prayers in Hebrew. Like, once I heard the Hebrew and I heard they was doing the holidays and stuff, it really drew me in, because I was like, I didn't know none of it. I didn't hear the word Torah until I was like 30 years old. But I've been going to church since I was little, you know what I mean? So, right. And then I found out what it meant, and I heard then Jesus became Yeshua. Like, it was this whole thing, like, wow, I didn't know all this stuff, you know? So right. I started attending there. And then I was wondering to myself, why don't the Jews believe in Yeshua? Like, what's their problem? You know what I mean? He's all over, right? He's all over the Bible,
He's on
right?
Every page, right?
What's going on? So I Googled it, and the thing was, I've always heard a Christian response. I never asked a Jew. I never talked to a Jewish person. Like, it was always what the Christians say, what their reason why the Jews don't believe. So I Googled it, and I came across Rabbi Mizrachi. In this debate, he was debating this priest. It's like a 2 or 3 hour debate. It's a long debate. The priest didn't have no answers for him. And it wasn't the most structured debate, so you kind of got to suffer through it. I'll be honest. But the priest was just, he didn't have no answers. And I started doing some more research, and I found, came across Kabod, Aisha Torah, like all these different websites, right? Torah Anytime. And I started listening to what the rabbis had to say, because I never really listened to any rabbis before. To me, it's rabbinical Judaism. It's rabbinical, they're Pharisees, right? Everything that you've always been taught. Oral Torah, oh, that's man-made, all these stuff, right? So the false fulfillment citations is what took me out of the church. If I was to give one answer, that would be the definite. Everything else was supplemented, right? Mm-hmm. But the idolatry because not all Christianity is idolatry, but majority of it is, because not all of them think Jesus is God, but they do hold a lot of practices that would be included in idolatry, the symbolizing of the drinking of blood and all that stuff. That's what idolaters do. Even if you're not worshiping Jesus, you're doing stuff that idolaters do. But the false fulfillment citations is what really was the nail in the coffin, because once I got to actually reading these things in context, I'm like, wow, this is not about him. Right. And if you cherry pick it, it's all about him, right? Exactly. Yeah. If you cherry pick it, it's completely about him. And just reading what the Messiah is even supposed to do, he didn't do it. He's supposed to come back and do it. And then when you realize his gospel, he was preaching to the people he was supposed to return to, and everything just started to fall apart. And I realized I was more afraid of Jesus than I was God, because I had been drilled with Jesus in my mind so much to where I realized I was fearing the wrong thing, because I never thought him as God anyway. And I'm like, wow, I was scared. You denied me before man, I deny you before God. Like all these verses was coming into my mind. Mm-hmm. And I say, you know what? He's a man. And the Torah says, cursed be he who trusts in the man, Jeremiah 17, right? So I let it go. And I started reading the Torah. I started learning Hebrew, and the light came on, and it was like, I got to start over. So then I came across the Hebrew Israelites. And now when I say that, that's a broad term, because there's so many factions of Hebrew Israelites, and 90% of them are just Christians that call themselves Hebrews, right?
Right, right.
You got the Black Hebrew Israelites. You got so many different groups, and I didn't really, join a camp or a particular group, but I was basically reading the Bible from the perspective of, I'm an Israelite. I'm going to keep these laws. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to keep all the laws of the Torah. That's what Christianity tried to do away with, and I started keeping everything. The holidays, I started doing everything, and I started learning the oral Torah. And the oral Torah blew my mind, because I didn't realize that the New Testament was full of the oral Torah, but it's not presented that way.
Yeah.
We've always been taught, it's rabbinical, right? So learning the oral Torah, I realized that there's criteria to be a Jew. You can't just proclaim to be a Jew, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm Jewish one day. Mm-hmm. So I started looking at my ancestry. And my mother's ancestry is Native American. Now, I know there's a lot of people who claim that the 10 lost tribes are Native Americans. So I went down that road. But my specific tribe, I can't find in the Creek, because I'm from the Creek Nation on my mom's side by bloodline. And I can't find right now, and I'm not saying it won't happen, but right now I can't find any link to Israel through these tribes.
Right.
From my research, and I've only been looking down that road for a couple years now. I've got books and dictionaries. I'm looking at the language. I'm trying to find something. There's a couple of things, but just like any language, just Hebrew and a lot of different things. But that doesn't make you Jewish, right? Right. we got a similar word, right? No, that doesn't make you an Israelite. But so I had to basically back up again. And I had to humble down, because who doesn't want to be an Israelite, right? Like it's the royal family, right? Mm-hmm. I had to say, you know what? Until I can prove that, I'm going to follow the laws of Noah, because I came across that, studying this stuff. And I was like, right. Oh, that's cool. But I'm an Israelite. So that, for him, that's cool. But once I realized, let me just go all the way back. And then I also realized is, let's say I'm an Israelite. What if my wife doesn't want to convert?
Right.
I got to raise my kids like this. We got to change my diet. I can't work on Saturday. Like my whole life has to change. And I had no support system. I live out here in Colorado. There's a couple of Jewish neighborhoods, but they're not so inviting. Mm-hmm. They're not, bad. I'm not trying to say they're bad or nothing, but I try to put my kids in daycares. I try to go to a couple of synagogues, and it was, you ever felt tolerated? I felt tolerated. You know what I'm saying? I didn't feel welcome like that. You know what I'm saying? There was a couple people who was cool though. There was a couple people who was like, hey man, how you doing? And chopped it up with me. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to say everybody was like that, but overall it was just like, I can't, well, for one, I'm trying to put my kids in daycare. The holidays are completely different. So my job schedule, like I was like, this world, I can't adapt to this world. It's just not, I can't do it. And I can't force it because for one, I'm be out of work. I just couldn't. It wasn't compatible. Right. Long story short, so I just fell back. I started learning the laws of Noah. I started debating, and I came across Rabbi Singer. And he's the one that helped me get my mic, my YouTube set up. He told me stop doing your YouTube page, because if you go to my YouTube page, all my videos, I just show my screen. He said the people need to see you. So he told me with the lights to get, the camera to get, all my everything that's set up. And shout out to Rabbi Singer. He walked me through the whole thing. I would talk to him while he was in Israel and everything. And he linked me up with William. I reached out to William, but I was talking to both of them at the same time, trying to get everything going. And eventually I got on William's show. And then from William's show, and we talked about this before, but that's how I met Rob Bryant, and he had me come on the TEV. And then through him, I met Rabbi Todd, who's who owns Yeshiva Pirkei Shoshanim. And then I started teaching on there. So it's just been this journey of, here I am teaching the 7 laws of Noah, still learning Torah, still learning the laws of the God of Israel, and I don't have to be an Israelite.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that is very satisfying, because
definitely,
to be a Jew is not for the faint of heart. It's not.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing, but it's not for everybody, and everybody can't just jump into it, and neither do the rabbis don't even recommend you do that. You can't just jump into it. You really have to change your life and your surroundings. You can't eat at your mom's house no more. Like, you can't just be an Israelite and do what you want to do, so that's kind of my brief story.
Beautiful though. It's very similar to, mine, and of course multiple others that I've talked to, of course. But aside from the, scriptural discrepancies, aside from the New Testament discrepancies, would you say in your time in Christianity you experienced any spiritual abuse?
No. Actually, the only abuse that I can say was basically, I wouldn't even call it abuse, but kids don't want to read, right? So my mom used to have us read these, because the witnesses, like I said, they got a lot of literature. So they had these books called Young People Ask, and all these books for kids, right? Mm-hmm. And we used to have to read these books, because when we would have Bible study, our teachers would come by the house and we had to pre-read. So when they got there, we would know what we were going to go over. And it's like, you can't go outside till you finish reading your books. And if you don't read your books, you can't go outside, right? So to me at the time, we hated it, right? But I'm so happy that my mom made me read, because I was able to retain all this information. So as I'm older now, and a lot of it was biblical knowledge, you're reading about Noah's Ark, and like you're reading a lot about the Bible. It was just with a Christian spin on it. So once you're able to separate, because with the witnesses, the Watchtowers, the Awake magazines, everything is directed to where when you're reading a magazine, the answers are given to you as you read it. So they kind of direct your thinking. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how it's set up.
Right.
So I was able to retain a lot of information. So as I got older, debating Christians, once I realized, once I started questioning Christianity, I knew the arguments.
Right. You had the opposing playbook, right?
I had and it's funny because that's exactly what I call it. I call it the Christian playbook. So when I tell people I don't believe in Jesus, they'll think, oh, well, you never read the New Testament. And I'm like,
contraire,
little
right?
do you know, right? So shout out to my mom for making us read and study. But as far as abuse, no, never experienced any abuse. Well, I will say this. Now, my dad's side of the family went to a Baptist church, singing, regular preacher church. It wasn't
right.
There wasn't a lot of literature going around. You listen to the pastor, you go home.
Yeah, and that's
go home.
the vein of Christianity. You're seeing more of these totalitarian behaviors in anyhow.
Yeah, that was just like basic church. So there it wasn't the same. But what the witnesses, what I noticed about my peers, the people that I went to church with, and the people I went to school with that went to the Kingdom Halls, a lot of the kids, they were so restricted that they rebelled. A lot of them rebelled. As the older we got and the more freedom we got, they stopped coming. A lot of them ended up in jail, ditching school, dropping out of school, running away, because they had so much restrictions that, again, I got to give a shout out to my mom. She didn't celebrate the holidays. She didn't acknowledge all that stuff. But the other people in our family who did, she let us participate. So even though she didn't do it, we had Christmas, we had birthdays, because the rest of the family, she was the only person in my family that actually went to the Kingdom Hall. On my mom's side of the family, there really was no religion besides my mom. Okay. My aunts and uncles on my mom's side didn't go to church, none of that stuff. You know what I'm saying? It was just a regular house. There wasn't spirituality in the house. It was a lot of superstition, you know what I'm saying? Coming from the Native American side of it, you know what I'm saying? A lot of superstition stuff. And really not even a lot of the culture, just superstitions. It wasn't really like Native American superstitions. It was not biblical. I put it like that.
Right.
My mom brought spirituality to our family. You know what I'm saying?
They just had like that faint esoteric element to the way they
exactly. So the spiritual abuse I witnessed on other kids and other families because of their restrictions, but my mom didn't do that to us. You see what I'm saying? So I did see it, but it wasn't in my house. You know what I mean? Right. And I think, and I don't know if she knew this, but I think she saw, if I let them taste it, they're going to see what's wrong with it, opposed to, no, you can't do nothing. And then when I get old enough to do it, I'm doing everything.
Right.
And that's what I seen people do. You know what I'm saying? Like, since I could never celebrate Christmas, I could never have a birthday party. When I get 18, I'm doing all of it. So opposed to, I got to taste it, and it's like, oh, well, it really ain't all that. You know what I mean? So, so I did see that type of abuse, but I didn't experience it.
Right. Now, I'm sure the majority of my viewers here, because I'm really not, obviously you drive past the Kingdom Hall like, oh, that's a Jay Witness place, but could you kind of like give a little insight on what exactly the witnesses are? It's very different than any iteration of Christianity I've been exposed to.
It's very different. They have a history of a couple of times giving some false prophecies of when the end of the world was supposed to happen. 1914 was a big deal. Charles Taze Russell was their founder. And I don't know how true this is, but I saw pictures. But, pictures is just a picture. Supposedly his grave has a pyramid. He was a Mason. Things like this. I only found this out years after I quit going. But as growing up, they have an organization called Bethel. And Bethel is pretty much what their headquarters is. And this is where they get their spiritual guidance. So where if you ask a lot of questions, they'll be like, oh, we got to ask Bethel. The elders in Bethel. And they have a hierarchy. They got the elders, and then you got the elders. Like, it's like a whole little structure. And very organized. There's no statues in the Kingdom Hall. Okay. When you get there, everybody's pretty friendly, pretty modest. Everybody's suit and ties. They sing. There's songs. You know what I mean? It's not hardcore pastor preaching. When somebody gets in a pulpit, it's almost like going to school church. They get up there, everybody's reading out the same thing. They'll say, okay, well, today we're reading out the Awake or the Watchtower, and everybody's got their scriptures, and they call on people, they ask questions, and they call on people to answer questions. As far as church goes, regardless if you agree with the doctrine, you're going to learn something. They're a teaching based branch of Christianity where they teach you a lot of information, just with a Christian spin on it, right? But they do have some doctrines that most Christians don't teach. They teach that Michael is Jesus, the Archangel Michael. They teach that that's Jesus.
Okay. They also have that strange 144,000 are going to make it to heaven.
They're big on that. They're big on that. So when they have the Passover, which is the Eucharist or the whatever that is, with Jesus eating the bread and stuff, when they pass that bread around and that wine, in my lifetime, since 6 years old till I left when I was around 20 something, 21, 22, something like that, I've only seen about 2 or 3 people actually take of it. Nobody takes of it. Because if you take of it in their eyes, you're part of the 144,000. So I've only seen a few people, and one of them was one of my friend's dad, and I was like, really? Huh? Okay. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, so it's something you almost have to have like foreknowledge and know you're part of the 144,000. Is that like how they look at it, or?
I mean.
Or it's just like, you know what, I'm taking a gulp, I'm making it. You know what I mean?
It was almost like they didn't really talk with the people. That was kind of more, and for me, because I wasn't old enough to really grasp and understand and ask the questions that I probably should have. When I seen the people that I did see eat of it and take it, there was more gossip surrounded it than they didn't teach about it. Like if somebody took that bread and drunk that wine, I didn't hear any lessons about why he did it. You know what I'm saying? Gotcha. In the next sermon or nothing like that. They did have the teachers that I had personally, because a lot of people, you grow up with them, you see them around the neighborhood. I had some really good teachers, like men and women. So I don't want to just cast shade completely on the organization, because the things that I was taught, just morality, forget the doctrine of their stuff.
Definitely.
But I was taught a lot of morality, dealing with drugs and sex and all types of things growing up in the organization, because there's so much information that they do teach you, and they do have ethics and morals and stuff like that. So, they just got they're Christians, so their doctrine is completely different, than the Torah. But I'm not gonna say completely different, but you know what I mean. But I learned, I have to say, I learned a whole lot of information growing up like that, opposed to any other church, because you spend the night at your cousin's house, you go to this church, this church, and you go to the church, you sing, you dance, you go afterwards, you go home and you go eat, and then that was it. You don't talk about it no more. In the Kingdom Hall, we was going 2 and 3 times a week. You know what I mean? Field service. My mom was going out knocking on doors. We was with her doing that type of thing, and you always had to read so much information. So it's a lot of learning in a Kingdom Hall.
Okay. Now, from my experience, I was in obviously a very right-wing, fundamental, Pentecostal side of Christianity. And when you leave that, you get like shunned. There's the ostracism factor. Did you experience any of that when you left?
Well, more so my mom did, because when I left, I started asking her questions, and she started immediately asking questions, and they couldn't really disfellowship me because I wasn't still showing up. So when they disfellowship people, it's funny, those people would still come to the Kingdom Hall, but nobody would talk to them. Why they kept showing up, I don't know. But growing up, there were so many people that was disfellowship, you just knew you don't talk to him. You see him, he's there, he's reading, you know what I mean? But nobody would talk to him. So it was a weird, like, I don't know why he even comes, right? But they still came. I just stopped going. You know what I mean? So they couldn't really kick me out. You know what I mean? Because I just stopped going. With my mom, the more she asked questions, the more that they stopped coming by. Because at first she just stopped going. When I told her about what happened to me and everything, she just stopped going. And they would come by like, you've been going here for years. What's happening? She would ask questions, and they just kept blowing off the questions. We'll get to that, and you just need to come and stuff. And eventually they just gave up.
Wow.
And I kind of told her, like, Mom, they don't have no answers, because there's no answer for that. You can't make up your new rules of, you're not going to baptize me because I'm not doing what y'all tell me to do, opposed to what happened with the Ethiopian dude. Like, that's a verse.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I was standing on that. You know what I mean? If this is the inerrant word of God, all this stuff that y'all done taught me over the years, I'm standing on this verse. You know what I mean? And there's nothing they could do with it. So, yeah, I didn't really experience that. And I kind of it really left a bad taste in my mouth. I just stopped going to all churches. I was like, I'm done with church. Then the Messianic congregation to me wasn't like church. It was more of Judaism. You know what I'm saying? It was not Christianity to me, because it just felt different. I was learning Hebrew. It was different.
Yeah. Different flavor, different worldview.
Different, right. So I don't want to say I left the church. I left Christianity thinking Messianic Christianity, or thinking Messianic Christianity was different. And it was just repackaged Christianity.
Yeah. Yep.
So if that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah, it's just overlaying Greece with Hebrew.
Pretty much, you know what I mean? So yeah, I didn't get any backlash, because I just kind of was like, they got the Heisman from me.
Nice. So let's talk about Clouds of Torah for a little bit.
Okay. So that's my name of my company, Clouds of Torah. I published a bunch of books that I actually took a lot of the books down. And one of the reasons I did it is because I didn't want to be a preacher telling people what to think or how to think. I just wanted to be a source of information. So my books were just a bunch of references. I didn't explain a lot. I would give a topic and I would give a bunch of verses to back up why I brought that topic up. And people was like, that's cool, but I want to hear what you got to say about this stuff, And I was like, nah, I don't really want to do all that, And, excuse me, I realized I needed to do that. So I said, let me take all these books down. And then I wrote my false fulfillment citation series, which is the only books that are available. If you go to Amazon, you're going to see like 30 titles, but the only ones that are available is the false fulfillment citation series. Got Kindle, paperback versions, audio, not audio book, but you can get them in, all over Amazon in any country. But those books, I go into the details of what I'm trying to talk about. I actually explain stuff and talk about it and give my references and stuff. And I think, well, I ain't gonna say I think, I know that for most people, trying to teach them the Torah, if they still have Christian lenses on, you have to answer too many questions to stay on topic.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're trying to teach them, so what about here? What about here? What about here? And it's like, if I just showed you 10 places that ain't Jesus, why would you take me to 11th and the 12th? Because I'm just going to keep showing you the same thing. So right. I said, if I write this book and I show you the top 10 playbook, the top 10 verses they're going to go to, Isaiah 53, Deuteronomy 18, the virgin birth, Acts chapter 2, the Pentecost, Daniel 9, the Psalm 22, everywhere that they're going to go, you talk to any missionary, they're going to go to these verses, period. Yep, they're going to go. I said, if I can knock those down, then I can teach people Torah. Yeah. So I said, I'm going to just focus on these 10 books. I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to give it a few years, get these books out, teach these books. I didn't even plan on teaching on Nativ and Tanakh talk and all this stuff. I was like, I got to get these books out. And the blessings came of now I'm teaching so many other topics. I'm teaching, on Nativ, we're dealing with God and the soul and all kind of different things. But I'm still able to pound on the Christian playbook. Right. On Tanakh talk, I'm dealing with Isaiah 53, all 12 verses. Every show is about one verse, and I just break it down as much as I can break it down. Yeah. And I go through the mess on Nativ. I deal with all the messianic prophecies.
Okay.
Because that's what people want to talk about. When you talk to a Christian,
right.
they only want to talk about Jesus and anything Messiah.
Yeah.
That's it. They don't want to talk about nothing else. So I deal specifically with all the messianic prophecies: Genesis 49, Isaiah, the New Covenant, right? Anything messianic, So those are the ones that I focus on right now because that's what people want to learn about.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Right.
So that's Clouds of Torah.
That, since I started the channel, and I have a couple shows on here that are, more Bible study type shows, and I've really noticed that their playbook's getting bigger because they're realizing that the main stuff they've always gone to is getting debunked all over the place.
Yes.
So now it's like typology.
Oh.
Like they just find like the most ridiculous things.
They're reaching, right?
it's
like somebody drowning. They're going to grab
I
anything. If you're drowning, you're reaching
anything.
Air,
it doesn't even matter what the context is.
It doesn't.
Like, listen, this will make you laugh. You ready? So, Joshua 15, Joshua 10, around there somewhere. I think it might be Joshua 10. Adoni Tzedek. The Israelites are conquesting. Gibeon aligns himself with the Israelites. The Ammonite kings aren't about it, so they create this little band, They hide in a cave because they realize they lost. Well, Joshua's like, you know what? Bring them out.
Bring them out. Put your foot on their neck.
Put your foot on his neck. Kill him. And then they pike him and leave him up for everyone to see. Like they stab him with a spear and put it in the ground and
hang him. Right.
Yeah. So I had this messianic person message me about that because Rabbi Federer and I had talked about that just briefly in a show about Melchizedek. And they were like, you can't deny the parallel. I said, what parallel? That pagan was put on a pike and put it and shown off for everyone to see. And they're like, but the name is My Master is Righteous. I said, okay. It doesn't change the fact that he was the opposition of Israel and was killed and was a pagan. I mean, if you want to type that for your Jesus, that's fine with me.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. Can you believe the stuff that is like being reached for now?
There's no connection. Okay, so because he was killed and his name is Adoni Sadiq, like what? I've seen them do some reaching, and like you said, now they're digging into the oral Torah. Now they're going into the Mishnah and
the arguments
all
that
the Midrash is.
Midrash, yeah, like.
I thought he was on every page of the Bible. Like, how did you completely shift, right? So what I've done is I said, okay, you want to tell me Jesus is in the Tanakh? I'll show you where he's at. Deuteronomy 13. Somebody who can do a false prophet who can do miracles and teach you something that ain't the forefathers did not know. That is what he did. Mm-hmm. So he's in Deuteronomy 13, not by name, but by character, right?
Right.
When there's a verse in Kings where it says that they got into a war with I think Moab, and the king took his son, his oldest son, and sacrificed him. If you want to pull that game, God will be the king if we're going to personify, right? God's the king who took his firstborn to sacrifice to win souls, but they just wanted to win a war. We could play the same game, but they don't like it how we play. Right. You know what I'm saying? Measure for measure, right? If you're gonna just paint him into verses, I can paint him into verses too.
Right.
The sad thing is they paint him into the wrong verses. Zechariah 13 talking about the false prophet. Right. Jesus quotes that verse.
Yep.
He quotes it. I'm like, do you need me to even say anything when he's quoting the verse of a false prophet and claims it's about him?
Well, I think half the problem is they start at verse 13. Or start at, they don't read.
They start in the middle of the verse, right? They don't think things through. You see what I'm saying? Like you said, when you cherry pick something, you can completely steer it out of context so easily. But now they're grasping for air, and there's really nowhere to turn but to what you say, typology, everything. You know what I mean? And dealing with Christians, what I learned and I learned this over the years, and Rabbi Mizrahi told me to do this too. For one, he said, be nice.
Mm-hmm.
I used to attack. I used to come with pistols out, knives, hammers,
throat,
axes. Right? I was ready, right? I was God of War. You know what I'm saying? And you can't do that because you're dealing with somebody's soul, and they're in a relationship.
Hey, you're gonna shatter everything they believe in.
Yeah, and they're in a relationship, and I remember being in that relationship, and It's not easy. You're not going to convince somebody in one night that Jesus is not who they think he is.
Right. You're right.
So what I learned is to ask questions and to go where they want to go. Mm-hmm. If you want to tell me he's here, let's go there. I'm not going to say no, you're wrong. I'm gonna read it with you, and then I'm going to ask you questions.
Right.
And I'm going to ask you, do you know the language? Can you show me from a Jewish perspective what that means? Then show me the Christian perspective. Because if you don't know the Jewish perspective, you don't know how this was looked at before there was a New Testament.
Right.
How was Psalms looked at before there was a New Testament?
Exactly. What did Psalms mean the day before Jesus was killed, right?
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. How did the Jews read Isaiah before there was a Jesus? Like what did they think about this?
Yeah, but even in the New Testament, Peter wasn't expecting a suffering Messiah. So.
No, they said, for God forbid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Supposed to die? What are you talking about, right? There were so many things, and it says that they didn't understand and all this stuff. And it's like, of course they didn't understand because there's no verse for that. You know what I mean? So ask questions. And what I learned to do, since I have the information, is I stay in a book. Once you start throwing Moses versus Paul, Moses versus Peter, they don't like that game because, oh, that's the Old Testament. You have a veil. You know, all the arguments, right? Okay. If I'm showing you Luke verses, if I'm showing you Matthew against your arguments, now you're not arguing with me. You're arguing with you now because you want me to read this book. I'm in your book. I'm not taking you to the Tanakh. We're going to stay right here in the New Testament. And now you got to answer these questions.
Yep. You
can't pull dispensation, Old Covenant. No, I read you what Luke said. Mm-hmm. Galatians 2:21. If you could be righteous by keeping the law, Jesus died in vain. Okay, so in Luke 1:6, when Zacharias and Elizabeth was righteous by keeping the law.
Yeah, what's that about?
What do you do with that? Oh, that was before Jesus was born, right? So now we got that covered. Before he was born, the law was the way, right? Paul in Philippians says he touched the righteousness that was in the law. Right? Okay. They can argue, oh, that was before, after. There's no date on that, right?
Right.
But if I go to Romans 2:13, it says, not the hearers of the law, but the doers of the law will be made righteous. Paul didn't expect us to read all his books, right? Then they're stuck. Mm-hmm. I didn't cite Moses one time. I didn't cite Ezekiel 18.
Right.
I'm in your book.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's, well, I got to get back to you. You don't understand.
I mean, even in the first chapter of James, he says you can gain atonement. You can have your sins covered by, I mean, the wording he uses is by bringing a brother back after backsliding.
Right.
Which, you know, if he was an Ebionite like we believe, that's very similar to Isaiah 27 saying if you break your idolatry, that covers a multitude of sins. It's a very Jewish idea.
Very Jewish idea.
But where's the Jesus blood at? But where's Jesus in that?
Where's the see? That's another problem.
And they don't even read James, I don't think.
Blood. I have a whole lesson called "Is Blood Atonement the Only Way to get sins forgiven?" And Matthew 9 verses 2. Jesus forgives the paralytic, right? The guy who's paralyzed. Your sins are forgiven. I said, when was he sacrificed? If he didn't have to shed blood to forgive people, why did he have to go through all this process? Why couldn't he just showed up and forgive people?
Right.
Where's the blood at?
Right.
That's the whole doctrine. Without blood, there's no life. Right? All this. the New Testament didn't count on people actually researching. It's just almost like, I told you what it is, and this is what it is. And it's like, no, the Torah is built on questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the rabbis argued. The Talmud is full of arguments. People don't realize that, you know. So,
well, all right, my friend. In conclusion, if you had one bit of advice for someone who may be like on that cusp, they're starting to have the questions, they're starting to see the discrepancies. Well, what would you say? What would you tell them?
Keep studying. Always study. Look at people who you disagree with. Always get different opinions. Get different angles. Get different references. Prayer. Reach out to people who know stuff. Reach out to the rabbis. Reach out to. There's so much information now. Like, we don't have excuses to be ignorant these days.
I mean, even if you just hop on YouTube, the amount of free information is limitless.
It is completely limitless, and use your brain. If it is not making sense, it probably doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? If you think you finding contradictions that are completely, opposing each other, like, you can't tell me that righteousness can get you saved and then turn around and tell me that it's weak and useless. Example, Romans 2:13 versus Hebrews 7:18. That it doesn't work. How is the law that makes you righteous weak and useless? It doesn't work. You see what I'm saying? You got to really look into this. Another thing is, do your research on Deuteronomy chapter 17. It says, if you have a question that's too hard, that you cannot answer, you go to the priest and judges in those days and ask yourself, when they was putting together this New Testament, what priest or judge of Israel was present to answer the questions of what books go into this New Testament?
Ooh. Wow.
If there was no Israelites there,
wow,
it doesn't work. Deuteronomy 17.
Right.
If there was no priests and judges on site, you cannot say that this is scripture.
Right.
So at the Council of Nicaea, show me the rabbi who was there, and I'll be quiet.
What, Constantine wasn't a rabbi, or what?
Of course he was. So was Rabbi Shaul, right? That's
right.
Messianic. In Messianic Judaism, everybody's a rabbi if you're a Christian, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
But, yeah.
I'm very much in agreement with that. I always say a religion that's based on belief, you have to really refute with knowledge. There's one thing they can't take away from you, it's your knowledge. They can belittle you and tell you you're an unbeliever and you're the spawn of Satan all they want. But at the end of the day, they can't take away your knowledge.
No, I completely agree.
Yeah, so learn, and seek out the people who want to help you learn.
Yeah. Ask questions. You got YouTube scholars and Google University all over the place, right?
It's sad because in especially the fundamental circles of Christianity, learning really isn't promoted whatsoever.
No, not really.
Read your Bible and listen to what I say on Sunday. But where's the learning in that?
Paul says, "Cursed be anybody who doesn't accept this gospel." After he tells you you don't curse nobody.
Right.
I don't know if Paul was schizophrenic or he didn't reread or like fact check himself or.
Well, according to the Gospels, Jesus was. I mean, they make God look schizophrenic. So
they did. He's praying to himself. He's got two wills. If he says not my will but your will, right? That's two wills, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't ask about the Holy Spirit's will, so he kind of left him out. He left himself out of the argument with himself. Yeah. Then he says, if you deny me or you blaspheme me, that's cool, but you can't blaspheme the Holy Spirit.
Right.
That means y'all not the same.
Exactly.
So he kills the Trinity. He himself does that. You know what I mean? So, and it's like Christians, they just don't want to see that. Exactly. It's always you don't understand. It's like, well, that's what he said. You know, if I tell you I'm married, what don't you understand? You know what I'm saying? Right. You know, so it's, you know, what can you do?
Yeah, it's not much you can do, right? Yeah. But all right, my friend, this was great. I really appreciate it, and I would definitely like to keep in contact. Maybe we can.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. We can do some shows together. I would love to do some shows together on specific topics, and we can just open up the share some screens and get into it. Right. You know. Right. Yeah, man.
We might even have to hop on that typology thing a little bit.
Yeah. Wherever you want to go, man. Because I like your title, Rediscovering God, because it's not like you actually left God. You just in a new relationship with Him,
peeling away the layers
without this extra person. You know what I mean? You remove the middleman, and now it's just you and God. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
That was when I heard what the Hebrew in the Ten Commandments means for no other gods before me. That it means like Al Panai. That changed
on my face. Right.
That changed everything for me. Changed absolutely everything. Because what is Jesus? Paul calls him a mediator. Calls him an intermediary.
Yes, yeah.
And what is that? That's just like this. That's like this computer screen between you and me.
It's almost like an obstacle.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And when I heard it described that way, it changed everything for me. I was like, wow, you got to get rid of that. Once the thing that is between me and his face is gone, then that's when I finally have, you know, thrown away idolatry and gotten to Hashem, you know, and yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And so far I'm self-taught in Hebrew. I can read a good bit of it now.
Good.
But it opens up the Bible like never before.
It does. I'll end on this. Ezekiel 14. People have an idol in their heart. Read Ezekiel 14, y'all, and y'all tell me. You probably weren't gonna respond to me, but leave some comments. Ezekiel 14 in the comments. Tell us what that really means. So with that, shalom.
All right, guys. This was Rediscovering God. My friend Dayvaughn Mays. Check out his books on Amazon. Check out Clouds of Torah. Find him on Tanakh Talk. His Isaiah 53 series is very good. I've been watching it. But be ready, because it's going to come after everything you believe if you're a Christian. But anyway, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Dayvaughn, I appreciate you. And this was another episode of Rediscovering God. See you next time, guys.